So what is mysticism or mystics, and what do I think about it? I think there's a lot of things that go on.
It no longer has that negative, off-putting kind of sense about it.
I've never found, for my own path, that trying to develop spirituality meant affirming where I'm at right now.
God is science.
God is the greatest scientist that there ever was.
Welcome to Mystics of the Heartland. I'm your host, Mickey Hay. In this series, we explore the intersection between spirituality and various disciplines, such as science, nature, and the arts. Join me in my conversations with community members and thought leaders as we explore how ordinary people live their everyday spiritual lives. Fortune tellers, snake oil salesmen, gypsies, soothsayers. These are often the images that come to mind when we hear the word mystic. But what about Persian poets, Mother Teresa, or the Dalai Lama? Are they considered mystics? And what about ordinary people? Let's meet several scientists and hear what they have to say about their definition of a mystic.
I don't like the word mystic because it's one of those words that's been appropriated and given connotations that really changed its meaning in the minds of most people, right? You have the connotation of mystic as being someone who's some sort of charlatan. You know?
What do I think of? What do I think of when I think of the word mystic? Russian mystics, Rasputin, sort of a snake oil salesman, someone who's there to take your money and possibly other things, whatever they want, a charlatan.
So when I was first asked about Mystics of the Heartland, the word troubled me. So things come to mind that I'm not necessarily comfortable with. A sense of sort of mystery mongering for the sake of mystery mongering. And I'm not interested in that.
Mystic was a term, I think, for the majority of my life that was kind of offsetting in some ways. Maybe not completely negative, but I think for me it didn't really sit as well.
The word mystic brings to my mind spirituality and also Sufism, which was the tradition among many Iranian poets and scholars. And I have been familiar with this culture because poetry is a big part of every Iranian's life.
It no longer has that negative, off-putting kind of sense about it.
I think that you don't have to have mystery to have wonder, and that demystification is actually a very important part of true wonder and true appreciation.
It takes me back to poems of Hafiz and Sa'di and Rumi. When you read, for example, the poems of Rumi, he is trying to answer this question that where we came and where we are going.
So Newton is one of the people that I'm interested in, and so another story that we tell ourselves is about his treatment of light and of the rainbow, and of how poets after this are, oh, he's demystified the rainbow, you know, he's taken some sort of mystery out of life, some of the wonder has gone from the world, and I find exactly the opposite.
And that's what I interpret or comes into my mind by hearing the word mystic.
Someone who is seeking to have a better understanding and a connection with something greater than themselves and something spiritual.
So what is mysticism or mystics, and what do I think about it? I think there's a lot of things that go on. You know, we feel it in the Mass, the presence of the Holy Spirit. Which you could never prove through science to somebody else. How would you ever believe it? Only if you experience it yourself, I think. And maybe this is what comes from my scientific mind, is I don't put any limits on what might be out there.
The more deeply we understand things, the greater the sense of wonder and the greater the sense of sort of appreciation for what we have.
You describe mystics differently than how I'm thinking of mystics. So how do you describe mystics?
Good question. How do you describe mystics? Are they charlatans? Or could they be, as Mark Wilson suggests, individuals seeking a connection with something greater than themselves? Perhaps the definition of mystic is evolving. Now let's hear what some scientists say about spirituality. Some connect spirituality with religion, while others see it more broadly, as a quest for understanding our place in the cosmos.
I think the word spirituality has different definitions for different people and different definitions for the same person over time. Part of it's maturity, part of it's life experience, but I think part of it's curiosity, and part of it, to use the phrase of St. Vincent de Paul, is a willingness to be disturbed.
I think spirituality is the part of us that's looking for an understanding.
If you step back and take a look at the total picture, you see one thing. But if you look underneath, it's sort of like you see all the stitching and everything that makes up that canvas or that picture. So for me, science is investigating all those parts that make up that big picture.
Science and spirituality go together, and I think people try to say that they're not mutually compatible, but I think if you say that, you're doing a disservice to both of those.
God is science.
God is the greatest scientist that there ever was.
For me, spirituality is having that understanding and that connection with something greater.
Do I have a spiritual life? Yeah. The Buddhism of my grandfather never transferred to me. That's largely the fault of World War II, I think, where doing anything that seemed Japanese was a good way to get yourself locked up. I began looking around at different things, and I finally, entered the Protestant world of Christianity, and that was fine.
Jane's a practicing Catholic, and I'm not. I regularly attend 3 different Christian churches.
For me and the God that I serve, it's just truly wanting to serve Him and try to live in a way and function on a daily basis in a way that would be pleasing, and just kind of living out that calling and that will.
Going from the Protestant world to the Catholic world, it's sort of like going to graduate school. You're going to get the real story.
I had a high school chemistry teacher who really inspired me, just made class enjoyable, and at the same time just really made the subject interesting. And I think just kind of seeing how things work in a lot of ways and why things behave the way they do, it's just kind of a really simple fit. On some of the assignments and notes that we go through, I will have his name kind of as a thank you to him, and just to give him honor, because this is where some of the stuff came from. There's always been a curiosity, and so science has always been something I've leaned towards.
You know, I was interested in a lot of different things. I take a variety of classes the first year, but one thing I took was physics. I promptly got a D on the first exam. And this was very devastating, and I probably would just pack my bags and left, save for the professor just encouraging me and so forth. And I think by a lot of luck or a lot of divine providence, I figured out how to do it. And I remember walking back to my apartment and looking up at the sky, such as you could see it from Los Angeles, and thinking, wow, you know, I know as much about this universe as anybody on Earth. And I thought, yeah, but what's in it for me?
I've never found, for my own path, that trying to develop spirituality meant affirming where I'm at right now. I have to leave myself open to being moved, and that might not be in a direction that I choose. And so it sometimes doesn't feel real comfortable at first.
What was the beginning of the world? Where's the world at now? Who's in charge of the world? Who makes the world go round?
It's sort of a journey, a self-journey for me on just discovering who I am in the universe and what piece of the puzzle that I am, and how I make that connection with God and everything that's out there, all of nature.
I spent 14 years managing education programs for NASA. When I left NASA, I was the person in charge of NASA's space science education and public outreach program. And I went into theoretical work, spending most time understanding what it all means, right? What's out there, how did it come to be? In our current age, truth is generally defined as that which you can discover through scientific means. But science is often misunderstood, right? Because what is science really? Science is observing things that happen in the physical world around us.
Science is about the pursuit of fact. Science often finds its most important discoveries not at the center of things, but at the boundaries.
This very careful observation and description of things that we can see, touch, or feel in some way.
You're always questioning. So you're seeking the truth, but maybe never always getting there. And I think that can inform the spiritual life as well.
But that's not all there is in the world, right? Because there are things that you cannot deal with that way. You say ESP and people think, oh, you're some kind of a loony. But what about a person of faith who wakes up in the dead of the night saying something's horribly wrong, I have to call my sister? And you discover that something is horribly wrong. You know? All right? And the fact that we cannot prove or disprove that through science says nothing other than that science is a way of exploring the physical world.
That takes us outside of our center, puts us to the boundaries, and it's there that we will learn the fastest and most effectively, and that will help shape our spirituality. So in science you learn from the boundaries, in faith you learn from the boundary.
The universe is vast, and we are simply trying to explore that part of it that we can access. And you have to admit, you have to confess that that which we can access is a very small part of what's out there.
And what's out there are many different paths to spirituality. There are many different paths to a career as well. Quite often, as it was for Mark Wilson and Philip Sakimoto, a teacher inspires one to pursue a particular career. For some, this is a spiritual experience of divine guidance.
There's oftentimes the question of how do you have faith and do science, and how can those two things coexist? And I think there is no issue. I feel that we are here and given a mind to understand things, to learn things, to explore things. At the same time, we are limited. We are not perfect individuals. We are not created to be without limitation. And so even though science allows us to learn certain things, there are going to be things that we may not understand. There are things that we cannot find out.
One of the things that I'm really interested in is how we come to understand the structure of the cosmos that we're in. So where physically are we located, and what does that mean for how we think about ourselves and our place in the cosmos? Going to need to know some physics if I'm going to understand how the universe works. But the questions that I have are philosophical. The questions are the big questions. So how does the universe work? And how do I fit into it? And how do we make sense of all of this? I take it that we're all on, well, collectively and individually on some kind of journey to try and make sense of ourselves and the cosmos and our place in it, and how do we live? How should we understand ourselves, and that affects how we live. How you think about yourself, how you understand how you're related to the cosmos and where you belong, that affects everything that you do. I don't believe in God. I'm a very deeply committed atheist. But I don't think that means that you don't have a spiritual life. I'm here at the University of Notre Dame, so I have great respect for those who pursue those questions of how should we live our lives through a belief in God. But for me personally, no. I'm, as I said, a very deeply committed atheist. For me, in order to make sense of myself and the world, there is no God, there can be no God.
When it comes to teaching, I think I am constantly seeing my students as not just people that I have to impart chemistry, but seeing them as true individuals, and understanding that each and every one of them deserves love, respect, care, attention, and along the way try to impart some of that chemistry as well. And I think just really building the relationship and understanding that they still are highly, highly valued.
The connection with people and the opportunity to hear from these young people how they're thinking about things and see them change the way that they're thinking about things it's enormously rewarding.
So often, spirituality and science are so separate, and I don't see that. I see them as being intertwined, as looking at the same thing from a different angle. I think I do have a calling to be a geologist, just in the fact that it's something that I have cared about in one way or another since I was a little kid. We clean up the soil and groundwater. We point out what some industries are doing so that they can change their practices because, quit dumping out the back door sort of a thing. In a larger sense, we are environmental garbage men, cleaning up after others many times.
There is a connection between spirituality, the awe that is God, and science, because you're working with students who are spiritual beings, and you're connecting them to the spiritual world in the form of science.
We go out and we share anything that we're doing, science experiments, our animals, our science to-go bus, and you see the faces on the kids where they are so excited, or when they walk in here to the Science Museum and they look around and they go, awesome.
I feel deeply that we're all led to do something in life. I think that our vocation, the career path that we end up on, it all comes from those seeds that are planted inside of us, which is part of our inner spirituality, our seeking of God, our looking for God, and the influence that God has in our life.
So we've helped put them on that pathway of discovery that we think is so important for all students, not just students, but everybody. I think the impact that my significant part here is to being able to share with kids, just to help them be on that self-discovery path and understand that they are part of that. I mean, they're an integral, important part of it, but they are part of that.
We are all a part of that, and ultimately, we will all leave this life. What do you think comes next? Is it the end, or is there more?
What do I imagine comes after this life?
Oh, I don't think about that very much. I leave that to God.
Because speaking as a scientist, I have no idea.
Well, I don't know.
I don't believe that there is a better life to go to. This is it. So we have, this is a kind of sort of crushing burden to ease what there is and to make the best of what there is now, and there is no comfort.
There is an eternity, an afterlife, and in a sense, a place that we all will be going.
We just give the energy that is vested in us back to the universe, and that continues for future generation.
What I think is going to happen after this is that spirit will continue on in a different realm. That spirit will be continuing on with God.
If I am doing the things that the religion is asking me to do, that it talks about, the things that I believe in, the things that I have faith in, then I'll end up in heaven.
At this funeral mass, the priest was saying that we don't know. It's not for us to judge.
And I think after this life here, this time here, we move on to a place beyond science, a place that's greater than science. And so the scientific aspect is not really something to focus on.
We were talking about death one day, and somebody says, it's hard for me to comprehend that the person that I truly am would cease to exist. And I thought, oh, well, you really don't cease to exist. There is a part of that continues on.
Whatever it's going to be so much better than what we can imagine that I'll just leave it up to that I'll find out when I get there.
What I would love to happen would be you go to heaven, and heaven for me might be completely different than heaven for you, because I think the 1920s version of heaven of sitting around strumming on harps, sitting on a cloud, I think of heaven more as just being in the presence of God.
The eternity that I hold near and dear and envision being in heaven, I feel like is going to be a time of such joy that there won't be question, there won't be doubt, there's not going to be second guessing.
None of us can know what it's going to be for you or me or anyone else.
And God's Spirit surrounds us in soil, in air, in water, in people. We just have to open ourselves up to be more perceptive to what's there already for us.
Time will be focused on just that joy, that praising, that experience.
And that's it, I guess.
So where does spirituality intersect with your life? Join us next time on Mystics of the Heartland, and we'll explore topics such as nature, theology, and the arts. I'm Mickey Hay, your guide on this journey. Thank you for being with us.
We are stardust, billion-year-old carbon. We are golden, caught in the devil's bargain, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden.